Now we're going to create the pop-up floating canvas with the player's details. I made this look a little bit nicer with some WPF shapes. I think we can do some things better in the future, and I eventually want to take some of these canvases out and make them their own user controls, so it's a little bit easier to work with them and make them look a little bit prettier, but this I think is a good starting point. We'll start by modifying the living entity class in SOSCSRPG.models. On lines 66 and 67, I added a new hit points string property, and this is just a string that's built off of the current hit points and then a slash and then the maximum hit points, so the player can see they have 5 out of 10 hit points or whatever. And I added the JSON ignore attribute on line 66, so this does not get written out or read from the save game file. Because the current hit points and maximum hit points are already saved, and this hit points property is just derived from those two values. We don't need to save it. The next step is to go into SOSCSRPG.viewModels and modify the game session class. On line 93, I added the new property for the player details, pop-up details, so we can bind it to the canvas. And then on lines 131 to 140, inside the game session constructor, I added the player details population with the starting top and left location, visibility, and the widths and heights. The next step is to go into the WPF UI project and modify mainwindow.xaml.cs. And on line 109, inside the initialize user input actions, I added a user input action for the letter P for the player details. And just like the other canvases we have, all it does is it switches the is visible to the inverse of the current state. So if it's hidden, it displays it. If it's displayed, it hides it. And then on lines 192 to 195, I added the new close player details windows on click. This is so when the player clicks the X button in the player details canvas, this will make it invisible. It will hide the canvas. The next step is in the WPF UI project, go into mainwindow.xaml. Now we'll modify the actual layout. And from lines 60 to 210 is the new canvas for the player details. If you notice on line 61 through 67, we bind to the player details property to get the visibility in the left and right and all that. The rest of it is similar to the other canvases, but I did do something different. If you notice, we have 4 rows in our layout grid. The first one is auto, and this is where we'll have the label for player details and the X button. We've got a little 4 pixel high spacer, and then we have this hard-coded 60 pixel height. That's because I want to put some graphics in there of it, and they're going to be a certain height. And then this final row is auto, and that's where we're going to put the things like the player's XP, hit points, and all their player attributes. So here on line 84, we have the label that says player details. On line 89, we have the button that's the X button for closing the panel, and the click event goes to the close player details window on click function that we just added, just like all of our other canvases. But things change a little bit from lines 103 down to 205. So this is that 60 pixel high, that third row, which is grid row 2, since we're 0 based. First thing I did is drew a border that was for that row for both columns, and we're actually doing 2 rows here because I want this background color to show up for both the this 60 pixel row and then the next row. So this just sets the background. Then for grid 2, for column span of 2, so this is that 60 pixel high row, I added another canvas here. And if you notice, I have 2 ellipse controls in here. We'll look at the label ones really quickly, just so you can see those and we can get those out of the way. We have one label here that's going to show the current player's level and one that's going to show the current player's name. But these ellipses are circles or ovals. And here I'm saying inside this canvas for that third row, 3 pixels from the top and 3 pixels from the left, draw a circle or an ellipse that's 50 pixels high and 50 pixels wide. Give it a stroke length of 1, so that's the thickness of the line, and set the color to steel blue. And then the second ellipse is 5 pixels from the top and from the left, so it's a little bit further in, and the size for the height and width are 46, so it's a little bit smaller. And we'll see this in a minute when we run the program. But basically this draws a circle with another slightly smaller circle. And then this label, where we have the current player's level, we set the canvas top and left to 5 pixels and a width of 46. So that's going to kind of center it in this ellipse here. And I added the horizontal vertical content alignment and vertical content alignment to center, just so this level here is kind of in the middle of this label, which should put it in the middle of the smaller circle. And then we have this other label here for the name. And for both of these labels, I set the font size to 18 points and the font weight to bold, just to make it a little bit more obvious. And then in the final part of the grid, we have that final row. It's a simple layout grid here with 3 rows. And we have the experience. We have a label for the experience and the experience points, a label for the word gold, and then the current player's gold, and then a label for their hit points with that new hit points property. So this will be the string, 5/10 to show them they have current hit points of 5 out of 10 maximum hit points. And then lines 180 to 204, we have the list box, and this is the list box that we had before from the current player's attributes to show their strength, their dexterity, their charisma, all that. Same, I think I basically copy pasted this from the old code into here. And I just said, put the list box in grid row 3 in the column 1. So it's going to be the second column. So it'll be to the right of these values. Now that we have all the player's details in this new canvas, we can get rid of the old player stats section. That was the grid that was on lines 285 to 342 before. I can't show it to you because I deleted those, but it was down here after the canvases and I think before the gameplay. We can now go into the gameplay and set the column span to 2 and the grid column to 0. So that's going to start it in the leftmost column and take up 2 spaces before. Whereas it used to just take up 1. And this grid here is the one that contains the game messages, the location information, and the monster information. And one final change I made is in the combat controls that now should be on line 557. The horizontal alignment used to be center. I made this right just to kind of move things over a little bit because personally I've been laying out these canvases on the left side, and they could cover up the drop down for the weapon to attack with and the consumable to use. So instead of using center, I just moved it to right. Now let's run this and see how it looks. Start a new game. And let's get a fighter here with a strength of 12. Use this player. So now here's our new layout. And if I hit the letter P, here's the new player details. You see here's the 2 ellipses, the circles we drew with the level inside, and then the big name here. And of course the experience, the gold, their hit points, and then the player's attributes. If we go north and we fight, so we defeated a snake, we see our experience is updating, our gold is updating, our hit points are updating, and now we have a nice little panel for the player details. In the next lesson, I'm going to move all these game messages into a pop-up canvas, and that will basically give us this whole big top section to eventually draw out a whole game map. Instead of just having the individual locations here, we can have a map of the world, and we can start moving a character around in the world. Then after we do that, it will be in the save game and load game, we'll want to store the settings of all these different pop-ups and their visibility states. As always, the source code will be available on GitHub or on the support page. If you have any questions, please leave a comment below the video on YouTube or on the support page, and I will get back to you as soon as possible.